All right, we will get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on the webinar, Identifying the Opportunities of the USMCA on the Automotive Industry, in partnership with Cherry Bekaert and Baker Tilly. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Thais Voot, and I'm the events manager here at the GACC South. And just a few housekeeping items. We will record this, so if you want to reference it later, please send us a request. And we hope to keep this conversation very lively, so please post any questions or comments that you will have in the chat, and we hope to address all of those at the end. Now I'd like to hand over the floor over to Joe. Joe.
Thanks, Thais, and GACC South for making this happen and making this possible for me and my good colleagues from Mexico to talk about the USMCA. Warm welcome from my end as well. My name is Joe Hainer. I am heading the foreign direct investment practice for Cherry Bekaert here in the US. So I'm helping clients to successfully grow internationally. And right now we have a lot of topics and interest in strategic discussions around the supply chain realignments, and supporting my clients with the operational execution on these supply chain projects. I'm very excited to have my colleagues and friends, John and Eliel, joining us from Mexico City today, bringing some good context into the discussion from the Mexican perspective. John, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yes, Joe, thank you very much. My name is John Milner, partner here in Baker Tilly in Mexico. Very honored to be able to work with Joe. We've known Joe for a number of years, so we've worked together on a lot of cross-border projects. And obviously the topic of our conversation today, nearshoring. We work a lot with supply chains, also with all of the compliance, import-export regulations that one has to deal with these operations. So with that, I'll pass over to Eliel.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, John. Pleased to be here. And yeah, like you comment, we have been working together for a long time and dealing with multinational projects. I can assure you that we have many perspectives to share with our clients and to make their business successful.
Thank you. Diving into the agenda for today, we have a packed agenda. However, we would really encourage the attendees to use the opportunity to ask questions. We're gonna compile our questions, and we're gonna set aside some time in the end to answer them and try to address them. And certainly you guys can follow up with us directly. Our contact information is going to be provided at the end as well. Now, from an agenda perspective, we're going to touch on kind of the big picture. Why is that an important conversation today? What are the numbers? What is the trade? What are the trade relationships between specifically the US and Mexico? We're going to talk about the relationships between Germany, Mexico, and the US from a manufacturing perspective specifically. We're going to touch briefly on current development and potential implications from the new Biden administration in the US. How can this interact with existing relationships and existing activities between manufacturing facilities in the US and Mexico? Eliel is going to give us an overview of the USMCA and current developments he's seeing with the USMCA being in place since mid last year. John and I am going to talk about supply chain disruption, optimization, and we're going to explain the nearshoring term and what we see in with our clients and their interest in nearshoring and making changes to the supply chain. And like mentioned before, in the end, we're gonna try to set aside some time for questions and gonna share some recent projects and success stories with you guys. Moving on to basically put this in perspective, as you might know, there's already a very strong business and export-import relationship between Mexico and the US. You, as participant today, you might have already existing activities in the US and Mexico. You might want to explore changes or increasing activities in Mexico. So we feel like looking just at the numbers, it seems there's a very important relationship. As you can see, that from a US perspective, Mexico is on the second place for US exports by country. And from a Mexican side, you can see that the United States is actually number one. And as a side note, 85% of the export value is driven by the IMEX, or more commonly known under the expression maquiladora regime. And Eliel is going to talk about this a little bit more later in our presentation. Diving a little bit deeper into the Mexican-US relationships, not surprising, within the top 5 states having export relationships to Mexico are the states bordering Mexico, just from a logistical standpoint: Texas, California, and New Mexico. However, Michigan is up in the top 5 as well, which is kind of historically driven by the deep manufacturing bench in Michigan, and also the strong connectivity, specifically in the automotive industry. Handing it over to John, who's taking us through the next couple of slides.
Oh, thank you very much, Joe. Before we move on to the next slide, which shows the close relationship between our 2 marketplaces, well, I would say 3 in North America, Mexico, United States, and Canada, and also with Germany. Just like to mention, Joe, that we worked recently, or sometime last year, was a very important manufacturing operation, automotive operation, which was looking to move their location from the United States. It was a German operation which was moving its operation from the United States into Mexico. So when we talk about, I think it's important to point out that sometimes we like to talk Canadian, Mexican, US, German, but at the end of the day, I think we're all in the same place, which is global operations. So it's very important that we have that context. There are over 2,000 German companies established in Mexico. So I believe after the United States, I think it's the largest country with operations in Mexico. And it's the largest trading partner for Mexico. Germany is the #1 trading partner in the European Union. And Mexico is the most important trade partner for Germany within Latin America. So it's important to note that. So there's a big volume of trade between both countries. So we mentioned some, there's a sample here of German entities. So it's noteworthy that most German companies which have operations in the United States have an operation in Mexico, or vice versa. And that could be manufacturing, it could be toll manufacturing. The maquila, which we will get into, maquiladora is basically a temporary import. So in other words, we have operations, imports which come into Mexico, we add value, and then they have to get re-exported. So Eliel is just gonna give us a brief description of maquiladora.
Sure. This is commonly known as toll manufacturing, where the entity in Mexico is only adding labor to the structure. In fact, all the fixed assets and the raw material belongs to a foreign entity. In this scenario, it could be a US entity. And in Mexico, the only thing that is happening is the production or the transformation of the goods. That's an arrangement that has been around for more than 50 years in Mexico with another name. I think it was a rebranding a couple of years ago that now you know that under the IMEX name, but the structure in the inside is the same. It's a toll manufacturer that is called Maquila.
Oh, thank you very much, Eliel, for that. And in terms of the main products that are exported, Mexico is heavily associated with the German manufacturing, heavy machinery, automotive, chemical, and pharmaceutical products. So we'll see that in some of the slides, and where we're going to look at the different manufacturing clusters within Mexico. And then it's interesting to note that we obviously then, Mexico re-exports or exports a lot of vehicles, organic food products, and as you can see, very popular products in Germany like tequila, mezcal, beer, and wine. So I think we have a good cultural combination. So moving on to the next slide, we're going to look at the different clusters. This one, the first cluster is, or hub, is up in the northern part of Mexico, which is geographically is a huge land base because we share the border with the United States. So the largest city, if you look on the map up in the northeast, is a city called Monterrey, which would be the second largest city in Mexico, but would be the largest manufacturing base. Okay, so you can see some of the names here. These are very large companies which are based out of Nuevo León. Nuevo León is the state where Monterrey is built. So a lot of the emphasis in the north is maquiladora. So you have a lot of these heavy manufacturing operations with the added value. So the product comes in and the products get reassembled. So they get then re-exported. Just an example here in Baja California, which is the kind of the piece on the left, the peninsula, which is sticking out, which extends down from California, United States. There's actually two states. There's the one in green, which is Baja California North, and then there's Baja California South. So you can see here there was 13 industrial plants were built in 2019, and there was an additional 4 in the state of Coahuila. Coahuila is a very large state in the middle of the country up in the north. But by the end of 2019, the north of Mexico had received an accumulated foreign direct investment of over $26 billion. So Eliel is just going to share with us some of the issues, concerns, and problems that come up with the toll maquiladora manufacturing.
Thank you, John. Yes, in fact, as I mentioned, this program is very, very attractive because once you import the goods in Mexico, you do that on a temporary basis. You are able to waive the duties as long as the goods are exported. And in combination with another program, which is a certified entity for VAT, the VAT that is triggered upon the importation is also not paid at the time unless the goods remain in Mexico. But in order to have this healthy operation in Mexico, you must have controls, and that is the key problem for most of the maquila. You have to keep track of everything that is coming into Mexico, since duties and maybe the VAT hasn't been paid, and that has to be exported in 18 months on a regular basis. So the key problem for most of the maquilas is the controls, and they have to comply with certain reports to show Mexican authorities that the goods are being exported on a timely manner.
And sometimes what happens is companies either, mainly unintentionally, they lose control. So if you end up importing products and don't pay your taxes, but it could be fixed assets or machinery, and you held on to them unknowingly or intentionally, and the authorities come in to do an audit, that's a good cause to either get into big tax penalties, fines, or even shutdown. So it's really important to be able to keep a track of what you did import and on what you have exported, because it's basically the maquiladora allows you to defer the taxes or not pay the taxes. So moving on, the next cluster. Sorry, Joe.
Maybe just short comment on my end. So unfortunately, I had to. Unfortunately for the client, this is a real topic. So it happened in the past, and it's surprisingly happening. Actually, oftentimes in the last couple of years, that specifically the topic around keeping records and value-added tax is going to be, or was going to be, a problem for clients I served and clients I'm helping with right now. So they're at the back end. So they basically are getting audited now, and now they face a question to show the record. So I just want to make sure that the audience sees that this is a real problem and it can add up. So if you don't do it or cannot provide the documentation over a couple of years, then these numbers and fines, these can be seriously big numbers.
Okay, thanks a lot, Joe. That was very, very, very insightful. The next hub or cluster is what we call the Bajío, is the center of the country. And this is a very, this is an area which has grown significantly over the last, I would say, 10, 15 years, whereby the manufacturing has, the whole base, the manufacturing base in Bajío has, based on the automotive sector, is extremely important here. And you can see some of the very large brands are based here. The German companies, these are the ones that we've highlighted. And we're mentioning here that the production costs and workforce costs are significantly lower than in the United States. I think it mentions here workforce costs are 30% less. I think when you get into skilled and unskilled labor, it's even more than that. So in other words, if you're looking at unskilled labor, it's significantly less. So where Mexico maybe had years of growth of 2 to 3% as an economy, you had places like Querétaro. Querétaro is a large city, which is about a 2-hour drive from Mexico City, has been growing 8 to 10% a year. So you've got all of the main manufacturing, automotive manufacturing companies are based there. So there's been huge growth in this region. Moving on, the next one is I think it's Puebla, which is about an hour and a half from Mexico City on the eastern side. And this hub is based around Volkswagen. So Volkswagen is a huge operation here, very big employer. Audi has come in the last 2 or 3 years. And the investment here has been significant. There's been almost $5 billion investment in this region over this period of time. So Eliel is going to share with us some thoughts on the Bajío and on Puebla.
Sure, thanks, John. I would say that
it has been a really important investment in that area. That is mainly because of the OEMs that have been placed in the last couple of decades. The oldest investment that we do have in Mexico is being Volkswagen. But recently we have many other investments, not necessarily German investment, but they are taking advantage of these, let's say, locations that has plenty of suppliers. And also I would say that currently there is a possibility to get more benefit from local jurisdictions, depending on the state you are planning to be located. And most of the entities are looking to be really close to their principal buyers, the principal OEM, and that is to preserve the continuity of the business and also the just in time, which is something that we need to take care of. Despite of the distance that we have from this region to the border, I would say that It is no more than 3 days, so you can get products up to United States from as far as Puebla, and comparing to what could happen if you source from China or any other Asian country. So I guess all of these regions are very well located in terms of logistic and closer, being close to the border within Mexico and US.
John?
I guess that the mic is off.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, sorry for that. So the last one here is the last, we'll say, cluster hub is San Luis Potosí, which would be in the, I guess it's on the eastern side of the country. And again, this is a very big manufacturing operation here. As you can see, there's lots of the automobile companies, then we got the different tiers, tier ones, tier twos, and so on, who were all present here. This has probably been a more of a recent addition. It's the other hubs which we've shown you, or the clusters, have probably been around a longer time. We're noting here there's approximately almost 500,000 light vehicles were produced in 2020. I think it's interesting to note that the total production of automobiles in Mexico in 2019 was 3.7 million units, and that dropped by about 15% to around 3.1 million for last year. And that was the whole of the industry. So that was for the number of vehicles that were produced in the country. And that was mainly because of the pandemic, because of COVID, the drop in the volume from one year to the other. Okay, so again, you can see here some of the very large, important German companies who all have a presence in this marketplace. So I'm going to hand over to Eliel for the next segment.
Thanks, John. Well, what we have here is a closer look on what is the German manufacturing industry across US. We have shown in the map which are the locations that are preferred by the German investment. And we have to say that as of today, Germany and German investment is the 5th largest trade partner for US. Compared to many other European countries, this is the largest one. And most of that has been related to manufacturing industry. We can see also there is an important number of investment that has been around since, well, we have here in the slide as of June 2018, but that investment continue to be more than 400 billion US dollars in the last couple of years. And that is because Germany and the German investors are looking to escalate for place as a trade partner for US. And in addition to that, we can see the generation of jobs and the jobs and what we have across all these entities is close to 700,000 direct labor connected to the manufacturing industry, mostly around 46% of that. And with that, we have a closer look of the German US manufacturing. So Joe, would you mind changing to the next slide? Thank you. And if we go deeper in that, we can see how automotive industry has been located in both countries, in US and Mexico. And we have the major investments for these OEMs located in these regions, as we did explain, which are not only logistic corridors, but also clusters for many automotive tier 1, tier 2 providers, and they all circulate around these OEMs, which are German investment. So it is important to point out that, and we'll see that in a couple of slides, that most of that arrangement is being interrupted by the negotiations of the USMCA, since part of the production has to have some specific labor wage and also some specific sourcing, so that the vehicle per se to accomplish USMCA origin has to comply with certain rules. So this structure was disrupted, but now is being rearranged by placing the production of motors mainly in the United States, and then the assembly of the vehicle in Mexico. So many of these OEMs, what in fact did was to review their internal lines of production and reshape that to comply with USMCA regulations. And with that, I pass it on to John, and he's going to talk a little bit further on how these arrangements were also in combination with nearshoring, reshape the structure of the automotive industry for both countries.
John, your mic is still unmuted.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's better.
Just to go back a slide, Joe. Yeah, I think it's interesting to hear when we look at the whole issue of nearshoring is, and why is this happening? And we see a lot of this. We see some major operations who are moving. They're moving across the globe. US companies and German companies to be based in Mexico so that they have close proximity to the largest market, which is the United States. So what happened during the pandemic, a lot of the supply chains stopped. They got disrupted, they got delayed, and a lot of them are just now catching up. So here you can see that you can be close to your market in, you got like 1,500 distance in miles. So in 1 or 2 days, you can ship the product from one plant to another. You can be closer to your customer. So a lot of the main reasons for nearshoring, why does it happen, is because of the better supply chains. So you've got more reliability in terms of when you're going to receive the product, geographical proximity to your end customers. So you're closer to your customers. You don't have to, you can give them more reliable dates. And also the cost structures, as we've talked about, are significant. There are a lot of benefits to be based in Mexico, so to have these cost benefits. And also there's a lot of affinity. There's much more affinity between our markets. Mexico and United States have been together geographically for many, many years and many centuries. So there's Mexican logistics, supply chain, manufacturing are very, very familiar with working with the US and with Germans, with engineers. So it's become a very attractive location for the nearshoring. So that's why we see a big increase in large supply chains that are looking to move over here. So with that, I'm going to pass over to, I believe it's Joe. You're right. You're going to tell us all about the new administration, which is not that new anymore. Right? Been there for...
Yeah, I think we are more than 100 days in, and I'm not sure if I'm qualified enough to tell you all about the new administration. So I'm going to focus on a couple of things which we feel like need to be considered, or to put it in perspective with the USMCA, and given that that treatment is in place since mid last year, which was basically driven by the old administration. Now we have a new administration, and just focusing on the American Jobs Plan, which was announced recently, and which is still going through administrative procedures. So we don't know what in the end is going to be coming out of that as a tangible result. However, there is a push for, and I highlighted this on the slide, for electric vehicle charging stations, purchasing incentives, meaning everything is kind of framed around the manufacturing behind it. So somebody has to produce these vehicles, somebody has to produce the charging stations, which then going to be put in place in the United States. And a lot of this manufacturing is going to happen in combination with activities in Mexico and in the US, we think, which kind of goes hand in hand with John's topic around nearshoring. We see indeed a lot of interest in thinking about the supply chain holistically, thinking about how can we mitigate risk, thinking about how can we be prepared for the next pandemic. Nearshoring is a hot topic right now. We're going to learn more about this a couple slides later. But for the new administration, we also see that specifically the proposed increase of the corporate tax rate from 21 to 28 could actually drive an increased interest in locating production to Mexico and eventually utilizing Mexican production capabilities even further in the future. With these comments, handing it over to Elia, who's going to tell us everything about the USMCA.
Thanks, Joe. I would love to tell you everything about the USMCA, but we need perhaps 2 or 3 hours to go over each detail. But I can tell you that right now that the USMCA implications for manufacturing industries what focus on these specific industries. So even when the next slide, I'm gonna talk to specific changes. What I can say to you right now is that for these industries, we have a couple of changes that we need to be very careful. One of them for the automotive industry, which is perhaps the most sensitive industry, at least in Mexico, was the change of rules of origin, which I did mention just briefly a couple of slides back, that the rule of origin did change and now implies that some part of the vehicle has to be manufactured with a specific labor cost and also with a specific source of raw material. That meaning that most of that has to be with iron and steel that has to be sourced within North America, not necessarily bringing these goods from abroad will help. And also that the wage that is implied to produce what we have named now core parts has to happen in other place that is not Mexico. That's the bottom line. So as I mentioned, the reshape on that specific supply chain was to focus on whatever the production was in Mexico, and they take out these core parts and locate those mainly in the United States. So in a way, we are breaking up the full production of the vehicle in Mexico to 2 countries and placing the core parts in the United States, most of that, and the rest of the assembly will continue in Mexico. So we have more logistic cost involved there, but it's not going to be as large as sourcing from other regions. Now, the next industry that has some impact, but I would say is a good impact, is the pharmaceutical industry because of the new cover on wider protection for intellectual property, specifically for patents, which was not necessarily at the same level in Mexico than the United States. Now we have leveraged that with the USMCA treaty. So we are considering that this will bring new investment to the region and particularly to Mexico and the United States. The next couple of industries that you may see, we have some key items that I just listed, but I would say that chemical industry will have some specific rearrangement because of the new set of regulations, the new set of rules for whomever is involved in production of chemical products. But that is also good because apart from the regular, let's say, rules of origin, which mostly were focused on where the accumulation of the value of the goods was located, the chemical industry just managed to set new rules where the actual production is happening, where the actual reaction for chemical products is happening. With that in mind, I will change to the next slide if you don't mind, Joe, just to talk on some specifics on these changes for the USMCA, focus specifically on manufacturing. You can say that the NAFTA upgrade was to include 10 new chapters, within that a lot of articles, but some of that was to upgrade the USMCA and to have more cover on specific items. Some of that, as I mentioned, has to do with intellectual property, but also with online businesses. In Mexico, we didn't have full regulation that allows and perhaps enhance the online businesses. Now we have some of that, but we also increased that because of the USMCA, mainly. But also we eliminated some of the chapters that were old chapters and they needed to change. So some of that went away and some new chapters are blended in. We noticed which entities or which sort of industries were affected. I would say that in this slide, we have a small resume about what is happening with the rule of origin in the second bullet, the rule of origin for our automotive industry. But apart from that, I guess the USMCA as we know it today is good for the region. It gave certainty for investors to continue flowing their money into the region. And with that in mind, I guess it makes sense to take a look with the region in order to have rearrangement in your supply chain, and also if you are planning to move part of your operation into this region, as we did commented, and we'll continue commenting on this nearshoring concept. And that pretty much is it. So I hand it over to John. Just 1 minute. He's gonna.
A quick question for Eliel before we move on. In regards to USMCA and IMEX / Maquiladora, do you have any concerns, or do you see any implications for the IMEX solution, which is a very attractive solution, as we could see in the beginning of our presentation? It's very well received and in place for many years. Is this totally separate, or is there any interconnectivity?
Well, I guess this is very connected, and I think we have to elaborate further in a couple of next slides. And I will say that a strict answer for that at the end of our webinar, because I think part of the answer is also in our next slide, so I don't want to take that material away from you guys.
Okay. Thank you very much, Elio. So moving on to the next slide, we're talking about we've already spoken about disruption, and then we figure out how we optimize the supply chain. There's 3 options that we're identified. We've talked about toll manufacturing or maquiladora. So that's which we said is mainly up around the border. It doesn't have to be on the border, but that's where a lot of the toll operations or toll manufacturing are based. And then we've got the traditional contract or OEM manufacturing, where it's a relationship with a third party. And the third one then is a full operation. And we've seen all of different versions, and we've probably seen a lot of activity in the last 12 months with the pandemic, the last 12, 18 months, and even before the pandemic. So, for instance, right now we're working with one of our customers who is actually, we're helping them with their procurement. So we're working very closely with them in terms of designing all of their procurement model. They're a company that works as a procurement company for a lot of manufacturing operations. So They're based here, and we're helping with them in terms of the technology and putting together all the pieces to be able to optimize and to so that they can find the best options in terms of supply chain, procurement, manufacturing here in Mexico. So that was just an example of one of the ways that you can be able to optimize your business model here in the country. On the next slide, we have, we talked about 3.7 million, the production, which was in 2019, which went to 3.1 million for this year. And that was the total marketplace. So if we look just at the German automobile manufacturers, we're looking at, for the local market in 2019, there was over 600,000 vehicles which were produced, and then there was almost over 400,000 which were exported into US and Canada. So you can probably see maybe 40% is for export and 60% is for the local market. And then in 2020, the numbers dropped, as we spoke about, and that's dropped to about 800,000 in terms of vehicles. So it's like almost 500,000 for the local market, again, German production, and then over 300,000 for the export. So the difference in the manufacturing, the vehicle cost between Mexico and the United States is approximately $4,300. That's where the local production cost for Mexico is more attractive. It's $4,300 as an average, less in terms of producing the vehicle in Mexico than it would be in the United States. Okay, so also it's noteworthy that Mexico has in 2020 was, in terms of quality, was actually ranked above the US and Canada in terms of automobile production quality. So that was an interesting statistic. So we're going to move on to the, I think it's almost, we're coming towards the end. So what we're going to talk about here is maybe to explain a number of ways that we can help you, and we're going to share some pitfalls, some of the errors and some of the problems that some of these companies that we work with have come across as part of their strategy, whether it's local, regional, global. Okay, so one of the first things that we often do is an assessment. So this assessment can be a business assessment, it could be a strategy assessment, it could be supply chain. So obviously we look at things like the marketplace, we look at the economy, and then we look at local domestic factors which may be relevant, like security in Mexico. Climate is an important here. We're a country with lots of sun, lots of rain, and sometimes we have things like earthquakes, which fortunately are not that relevant for most of the areas where these manufacturing plants are located in. They're typically in the southeast of the country. So the first thing is we do an assessment taking into account all of these different factors, and then we look at the different options which are available. As part of the assessment, we look at the different regions. So we have a lot of information in terms of the number of engineers which are qualified in the north of the country, in the Bajío, in around Mexico City. So we look at the number of industrial parks which are available. So we have some very modern new industrial parks, and then we have some other industrial parks which are not so new. So we can help guide you in terms of identifying also incentives, tax incentives, whether they're regional, state-wise, so we can help guide you in terms of being able to determine where to locate. It could be a greenfield situation, starting from scratch, or it could be an existing operation which you take over, okay? So Joe is going to walk us through some of the different options which can be opened.
Sure. Yeah. So I think it's important to note that these changes need to be, like you said, John, kind of globally driven, so holistically for the organization. And while Mexico and the US, that relationship is kind of a proven relationship for manufacturing organizations, I feel like it needs to be a strategic decision for the whole organization with a long-term perspective. And these four pillars we see here are basically a way how a project can be structured. And like John said, after assessing the current state, developing a strategy, and in this case, changing supply chain is not like a quick exercise, or it's something which can be done, unfortunately, fairly quickly. There are a couple of quick fixes which can be applied, but in general, it's kind of a longer term project. In our experience, can take 12, 18 months, sometimes longer if we talk about moving complete production sites from different countries into existing plants or building new plants. So we do an assessment, we formulate the strategy, we kind of lay out the options, look at all the implications, CapEx needs, tax structuring, transfer pricing, financial modeling. And once that's kind of laid out, which is in our experience, a 1 to 2 week process, it really comes down to the transition itself, execution on strategy. That can be the project management itself, where you have different players assisting in moving assets, kind of supporting the site selection and executing on the implementation of production facilities. It goes into labor and social security, transition and questions, tax compliance, the maquiladora related topics, if it's set up as a maquiladora. And then in the end, really going into compliance, which I feel Eliel might want to comment on the compliance and the fourth pillar of that project, of these project stages.
Totally, thanks, Joe. Yeah, we have to take into consideration the ongoing basis, the compliance. With all this effort, moving tons of money, well, I don't know if tons, but moving an important amount of money from the production that you have currently to be located into Mexico. Compliance is an important and key aspect. Since the beginning, you had to be very aware that in Mexico, there are some specific regulations and rules to follow that normally has to be more with the form than with the substance. So you had to comply in time with such regulations. Some of that has to do, as I mentioned, with the control over the temporarily imported goods, which are normally the way a maquila structure works in Mexico. But there is also the tax and also the social security regulations that have to be in place. So part of this overall project has to oversight as well the compliance on a regular basis. And within that, I guess in our firm, we do have specialists that can help you with the control on regular basis, but also the sort of arrangement that had to happen between related entities, such as transfer pricing regulations. And I guess it's a good idea to comment with all the audience some of examples that we have run into where companies overlook one of these key aspects, and at the end, it brings a certain amount of penalties, and in some cases also interrupt the production, and certainly that costs a lot of money. So, John, would you mind commenting on some of these examples that we ran into it?
Yeah. We've had companies that, I think I alluded to it earlier, that imported and brought in product but didn't have a good tracking. So One example, and this was actually a German investment. It wasn't in the automotive industry. It was another manufacturing industry. So they had some issues. And again, I don't think it was intentional. I think it was just poor control. So we had to go in and help them and do a lot of refiling. There was a lot of back taxes that had to get paid. Another example was, again, this was a due diligence for an acquisition. So we were doing the work and we had to do all of the financial, legal, tax, and we did all of the trade commerce piece as well. And in that particular transaction, again, it was a maquiladora. It was toll manufacturing, and they did not have the proper controls. So the transaction got put on hold because we had to go into a lot of manual reconciliations. Typically, we would recommend the use of technological platforms, and I think Joe is going to explain to us about some of the other events we're going to have coming up. But it's very important to be able to, nowadays, it's difficult to be able to operate without the use of the proper technology. So in that particular transaction, they had a system, but they were not properly using it. So the buyer basically kind of said, hey, hold on a second. I don't want to go ahead with this transaction because I want to find out if I'm opening up a big Pandora's box or a can of worms. And so they wanted to know whether the risk that they were getting into. So we were able to go in and basically dig deep and just go into basically the importations, entry into the warehouse, the manufacturing, the balances on hand, and the shipments, and so on. So it was really that basic. So we were able to turn around and give them a high confidence level that in that particular case, it appeared that there was not large outstanding taxes which would have been due. So the transaction was able to go ahead.
Good, thank you, John. I don't know, Joe, do you want to comment on some examples on how some of our clients may run into trouble if they don't follow some of these specific steps to setting up in their operation?
Yeah, I have a couple more examples to share, but I want to reach out to Thijs and see if we received any questions, just given that we have, I think, only 6 minutes left. And if we received anything, I would like to see if we can address it. And
yes, of course.
Okay,
actually,
great.
There's one referencing this slide. So are you able to share which OEMs you've worked with directly for these services?
So depending on the confidentiality arrangements, I cannot directly share which OEMs we work with in the past. I know about John and the team in Mexico, but you want to be mindful of that situation. However, under confidentiality arrangements, we can certainly share some more information. So I would recommend whoever asks a question to reach out to me directly, and we can see what we can share.
Yeah, we can speak generically about countries or industries, but we're not allowed by our confidentiality with our customers. So the company names you saw on the slides, they were just, it's public information, and we don't talk specifically about companies when we're on our calls or webinars. But because of the magnitude of these companies, we just make them available on the slides so that the audience can see that all of the relevant companies in Germany have a participation in Mexico. But what we could say is that we certainly work with a number of the largest. We work with a lot of the large operations. We work with mid-tier, and we work in the first tier, second tier, right, in automotive, in manufacturing. I don't know, Eliel, if you'd like to, pharmaceutical.
Right. I think you mentioned the most important industry that we have worked with, but yeah, I think we can certainly talk about this if you reach out directly to Joe or to our staff in Mexico as well. Thank you.
Sounds good. And I can share that in the thank you email for those who registered. So they'll have your contact information as well. Another question just came in. Has the change of the USMCA made companies move operations to the US, reduce content in Mexico?
Yes, I would say both. We have a rearrangement. Some of the automotive industries, as I mentioned during the presentation, have split their operation in Mexico and take part of that into US, but also looking to the cost, they have also taken some of the operation in US into Mexico. So we are now looking at reshape on the total, let's say, manufacturing for automotive industry precisely. For some other industries, there are other factors to consider apart from the USMCA.
Gotcha. Do you foresee an increase in maquiladoras later this year?
Yes, totally, because some of those plans are long-term plans, and most of that is gonna be happening actually by the end of this year and the beginning of the next year.
Awesome. Thank you, Elio. That's pretty much all of our questions so far. A lot of people have asked if they can receive a copy of the presentation, and just send us an email and we can send you a copy.
Great. Thank you. I think brings us to the end, and we have 2 minutes left. So we wanted to share that this is a complex topic, and there are many questions and many subtopics which can be addressed or should be addressed over time. So when we were preparing, John, Elia, and myself for this presentation, we said this is actually too much for 1 hour, and people will lose focus if we go longer than 60 minutes. So let's break it down into in total 4 sections. So we want to just give a heads up for the opportunity to join upcoming webinars centered around the same kind of core topics, and kind of giving us the opportunity to drill down a little bit deeper into specific topics of interest, and also giving the audience some possibility to ask more specific questions in the future.
And if we have time for one more question, we just got another one in.
Sure.
Do you see the logistics evolved with getting materials back and forth, the border changing based on the new USMCA?
Do you guys want to comment on this? I can comment from a US side.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Joe, and I can.
Yeah, so there's certainly an increased interest, and we receive an influx of questions around logistics and revisiting the supply chain. Some of them driven by the USMCA, more of them actually driven by the experience made over the COVID and related shutdowns for organizations. So revisiting the supply chain, logistic solutions holistically is a big topic. And now that companies getting a little bit more certainty with vaccinations rolling out in different countries in different paces, they kind of get back to the drawing board to see, okay, how can we be prepared for next pandemic? What are the lessons learned? And how can we optimize the logistics between our manufacturing facilities?
Thanks, Joe. I will add only to that comment that, yes, in fact, there are now some initiatives in Mexico to reshape the way logistics are working, to increase capacity, and also to have faster lines across the border. Programs such as AO, which is a authorized economic operator, that in the United States is known as CityPath, now are very, very important key to access to that specific programs and to speed your logistics across both nations.
Great. Thank you, Joe, Eliel, and John for providing this insight. I know it was a lot to cram in an hour, but we'll share your contact information for those who have more specific questions. And thank you to everyone who joined us live. We appreciate it. We hope you continue to stay safe and healthy. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.